And in the absence of a lot of literature that was easily accessible to us and more importantly, easily understandable to us, we invited Art Collin to come and introduce the topic and guide us through the issue. And Art Collin is a longtime expert on Arctic affairs. He's a former Deputy Minister of Energy, Mines and Resources. He was at Northern Affairs. He's been on various commissions dealing with the subject and continues to be. And what Art told us today was a real revelation for some of us, particularly for myself. We really we had no more than a layman's understanding of the issues relating to Arctic sovereignty. And my assumption, for example, was that the Russians were challenging Canada's sovereignty over our northern territories and continental waters. Secondly, that the United States and the Europeans did not accept and were increasingly challenging our sovereignty over the Northwest Passage and the waters of the Northwest Passage. What Art explained, in fact, was that I was wrong, and those who have the same point of view or concerns were wrong in both issues. No one is challenging Canada's sovereignty over our northern landmass, nor over the maritime areas, the ocean areas that come under our economic exclusivity zone, extending out to 200 miles beyond our coastline. That's not being challenged. What is in the case of the Northwest Passage is, in fact, the question of management of maritime traffic and how that gets handled, and the nature of the waterway and of the management of traffic on that waterway, but not on the sovereignty over the actual water and the resources in the Northwest Passage. In the case of that Arctic basin stretched north of the Arctic islands, the Russians indeed are putting forward a claim to the Law of the Sea Conference on the Arctic in 2013, and they're claiming that their continental shelf extends out far further than had previously been accepted along the Lomonosov Ridge. In fact, they're claiming it extends beyond the North Pole towards Greenland and the northern Canadian islands, but not into our 200-mile limit. And I think there's that Art was also helpful in clarifying that. I had always assumed that Canadian territorial sovereignty extended in a triangle north from the Yukon and north from Ellesmere Island right up to the North Pole. We did say that at one point, apparently in 1931, but it's never been a formal position of the Canadian government, never been defined as such and never been accepted. Our sovereignty extends 200 miles past the continental shelf in the Arctic and all along the Arctic islands. What is important, Art was telling us, is to define exactly where that continental shelf is, because conditions are very difficult up there, and there has been a lot of work done under the Polar Shelf Commission and program that Canada started up back in the 1960s. But in the last 25 years, there's been a dip in our level of attention to the Arctic. And we haven't really defined where our continental shelf lies sufficiently clearly in the light of new technologies and so on and new discoveries. And it may well be that our continental shelf extends much further towards the pole than is currently assumed to be the case and that figures on maps. So what we have to do is to put a lot more effort and a lot more resources into charting our territories, the shelves, and to exploring and identifying the underwater resources. The bottom reason behind a lot of this concern is, as far as the territorial issues go, is that the Arctic is increasingly recognized as being a tremendous reserve of oil and natural gas and of valuable minerals. Some sources have estimated that it may contain up to 25% of the world's oil and gas reserves, but as yet unmapped and certainly undeveloped. The issue of the Northwest Passage, again a different one. To my surprise, I learned that no one is denying that the waters of the Northwest Passage, running from Baffin Bay along the Parry Channel and then down past around Banks Island and over to the Beaufort Sea, nobody is denying that those are Canadian territorial waters. The question is, how are those waters managed, and are they open to ship traffic, and who makes that decision? And in that regard, there are two options. One is that they are what are called technically internal waters. It's Canadian territorial waters, and we have the right to say who goes in or whether no one goes in under any circumstances and without any reasons. The other is that they are Canadian territorial waters, but that they are an international waterway, which means that vessels of other nations have the right to go through what is Canadian territorial waters. They have the free right of passage through that. That's not a challenge to our territorial sovereignty, but it is a challenge to our commitment to establish conditions under which that free passage, international passage, takes place. And Art Collins' own views, and by the end of the discussion, pretty well all of us seem to share them, was that it is actually in Canada's national interest to recognize and to declare that the Northwest Passage is an international waterway through Canadian territorial waters. But, and if we do that, we are then able to establish the conditions under which ships transit those waters. Conditions as far as the environment is concerned, as far as safety is concerned of the ships themselves, the security of the ships, pilotage, charts and maps, all of that kind of thing is the seaworthiness of the vessels, etc. We're able to establish those conditions, and that gives us a degree of control over the waterway, rather than denying it's an international waterway and getting into interminable international legal challenges, principally from the United States and the European Union, but conceivably from other major seagoing countries, challenges that, in fact, the basis on which we would make those or try to defend our rights to claim those as internal waterways is, as Art put it, rather anemic. What would be the benefits of Canada being proactive in stating that the Northwest Passage is an international waterway through Canadian waters? We would be able to lay down the conditions that I mentioned. We would be able to build up port facilities to service the vessels going through there, to establish, to build icebreakers that would be necessary for clearing the waterway in heavy winters and freeing ships that might become icebound, health facilities, and so on. And all of these things would be services that we could charge the seagoing traffic for, and recover some significant returns for the maintenance of those facilities. And more importantly, it would be a major shot in the arm for the development of the Canadian Arctic. So those were the general issues and considerations that came out in the course of the discussion. And to nobody's real surprise, most of us being absolute novices on the matter of the Arctic, we found ourselves agreeing with Art Collins.
We certainly did.
And does that sort of sum it up?
That's perfect.
Any other comments?
Yeah, it's good. Very well done.
Well done. Perfect. Great.